Welcome to the Context Minute, where we break down the biggest stories. So today, we're going to dive into a pretty wild speculative crisis from 2025 that put the world's largest island right at the center of a global standoff and almost broke NATO.
So how did we even get here? Well, it's a story that involves some really bold ambitions, some frankly mind-boggling numbers that went viral, and of course, some very high-stakes geopolitics.
Okay, so it all kicked off in early 2025. Then U.S. President Donald Trump decided to bring back an old idea he had in 2019, the idea of acquiring Greenland from Denmark. But, this time around, it was way more intense. The whole thing was framed as a critical issue of national security.
And the argument was pretty straightforward. The administration said that Greenland's strategic spot on the map and all its mineral wealth were just too important to ignore, especially with Russia and China getting more active up in the Arctic. Now, there was never an official price tag put on the table by the government, but this number you're seeing, wow, it really took on a life of its own.
So you might be wondering, where did that number even come from? Well, get this. It wasn't a formal U.S. offer at all. That $700 billion figure, it actually started and just exploded on social media. It was all based on estimates of Greenland's incredible mineral wealth. We're talking rare earths, uranium, you name it.
Now, this wasn't just online chatter. The rhetoric was backed by something called the Make Greenland Great Again Act, a bill that would have authorized the president to actually negotiate the purchase. But here's where things really start to shift. What started as a real estate proposal, well, it turned into something much more aggressive.
The language just got so much more intense. When a White House spokesperson, Caroline Leavitt, was asked point-blank if military action was a possibility, the response was, well, it was pretty stark. All options are on the table. That really created an atmosphere of crisis.
And it didn't stop there. To add even more fuel to the fire, a White House aide, Katie Miller, posted this doctored map of Greenland completely covered by a U.S. flag. And the caption? Just one word, soon. As you can imagine, this was seen as a major provocation and was condemned all over the place.
And this really illustrates just how fast everything spiraled out of control. We're talking about a 30-day crisis here. It starts heating up in late December 2025. By early January 2026, you've got a White House official, Stephen Miller, saying the U.S. has the right to take Greenland. A few days later, Trump himself won't rule out using force. And by January 12th, there's a threat of a massive 25% import tax on all EU goods if Denmark doesn't play ball. It was incredibly fast.
So faced with all these threats, how did the rest of the world react? Well, Greenland, Denmark, and their allies, they responded with a very unified and a very firm rejection. And that response was summed up perfectly by the political leaders in Greenland themselves. Their message was simple, direct, and powerful. We are not for sale. And honestly, that quote became a real rallying cry. You saw demonstrators hitting the streets for these huge hands-off Greenland rallies. Some people even wore these symbolic red hats that said, "Make America Go Away." It was a massive public pushback.
But this wasn't just about civilians protesting. The pushback was military and diplomatic as well. And this is a really big deal. Key NATO allies, we're talking the United Kingdom, France, Germany, Norway, and others, they launched something called Operation Arctic Endurance. It was a military show of solidarity with Denmark. Even Canada was thinking about sending soldiers to show support.
You can't get much clearer than that. This operation sent a very strong signal from NATO allies that they stood with Denmark and against this American pressure. And this is where things really started to change.
Then, right when the crisis seemed to be at its absolute peak, President Trump suddenly did a complete 180. It happened at the 2026 Davos conference. The threats of annexation, tariffs, military options, all of that was suddenly off the table.
Instead, he announced this very vague framework of a future deal that he said he made with NATO's chief. He claimed it would secure U.S. mineral rights and boost security. So you have to ask, what was this framework deal actually about?
Well, that announcement was met with a ton of skepticism, and for good reason. Both NATO and Denmark came out and denied that any kind of deal had been made that would mess with Greenland's sovereignty. So while the immediate crisis seemed to be over, it left behind some really deep questions about the state of these global alliances.
This whole episode had some serious lasting implications. For one, it really lit a fire under Europe to push for what they call strategic autonomy. Analysts were calling it an existential crisis for NATO. Some people compared Trump's strategy to the old madman theory, where you deliberately act unpredictable to get what you want. And it definitely made other allies, like Canada, start to worry about their own security.
And that really is the question, isn't it? The events left so many people wondering if this was just a bizarre, one-off crisis that got diffused, or if it was a preview of a much more unpredictable world to come.
That final thought really gets to the heart of it. It highlights the huge questions this whole crisis raised about international law and, really, the future of the Western alliances themselves. Thanks so much for joining us on the Context Minute.